How I Met the Hungry Man, Part 4. The last thing my dadio ever said to me was a lie. We were parked on a gravel strip that was little more than a memory of a road, the car's engine ticking itself cool in the suffocating silence. He held the scalpel so tight, his knuckles were bone-white beacons in the gloom. "When we get out of the car, Cien," he rasped, his voice thin and frayed. His arm was shaking, the little blade doing a frantic dance. "You face the house, and you don't look at me. You hear me, boy? You do not fucking look at me." I stared past him, through the smeared glass, at the squat stone cottage bleeding into the twilight. It looked less built and more like it had festered up from the earth. Weeds choked the stone walls, thick as veins. A sick orange flicker from a fire pulsed through a hole in the roof. I just nodded. I couldn't find my voice. "See that house?" he said when we were both standing on the gravel, the cold air biting at my skin. He was trying to sound steady, like he was pointing out a landmark on a Sunday drive. "We're just gonna walk to that door. It's all gonna be okay." The firelight inside danced, and I felt a cold dread coil in my stomach. "Didio, I'm not going in there." "Go." The word tore out of him, a raw, desperate sound that the night swallowed whole. Something in me snapped. I turned on him, my own fear finally burning hotter than my confusion. "No." His face crumpled. For a second, he was just a scared old man, the scalpel hanging limp in his hand. Then he seemed to remember why we were there. He straightened his spine and marched to the very edge of the gravel, his shoes scuffing the dirt where the wild grass began. He took a breath, and with the scalpel, he drew a quick, deep line across his own palm. Blood, black in the moonlight, welled up and dripped onto the soil. He lifted his head and screamed at the cottage, a strange guttural chant. "Ta akras ort. Tabharfide may be a do-it." The world went dead. The engine's ticking stopped. The hum of my own blood in my ears vanished. The fire in the cottage didn't just go out, it was sucked inward, like a sharp intake of breath. A profound, crushing quiet fell over everything. My eyes were glued to the dark rectangle of the doorway. Two hands appeared first. The fingers were impossibly long, skeletal, gripping the stone frame. They dug in, chalky dust puffing from the pressure, and then they pulled. A figure unfolded itself from the doorway, not like a person walking through, but like a thing that had been crammed into a space far too small for it. It was wrapped in stiff, dark rags that flaked away as it moved, and it just kept getting taller. Taller than the door, taller than the cottage itself. Its head was a swollen, pale moon lolling on a neck, no thicker than my wrist. Its legs were bent at cruel, unnatural angles, as if they'd been broken and reset all wrong, a dozen times over. It stood there on the grass, a crooked silhouette against the stars, and did nothing. I saw my didio's mouth move again, forming the same words, but this time no sound came out at all. The thing's stillness seemed to enrage him. He spun around, his eyes wild and black, and he grabbed my arm. His grip was iron. He started dragging me off the gravel, toward the grass. Toward that thing. The stories he used to tell me, the ones I thought were just to scare me, they all came flooding back in a single, ice-cold wave. Without thinking, I wrenched my arm free, and with all the strength I had, I shoved him. He stumbled backward, one foot catching the edge of the gravel. He fell onto the grass, and the sound of the world came rushing back. The first thing I heard was his scream as the grass shot up around his hand, wrapping around his fingers like green wire. The thing from the cottage moved then, scuttling forward with a horrible, lurching gait, its broken limbs swinging and jerking. The grass grew with it, a frantic, living carpet that swarmed over my grandfather, climbing his legs, his chest. Long, wet blades forced their way into his open mouth, choking his screams into wet, gurgling pleas. In seconds, he was just a thrashing, man-shaped mound under a writhing blanket of green. The tall figure reached him. It stretched out one of its twig-like arms, the muscles knotting obscenely under the thin layer of skin. The grass parted for it, pulling away from my didio's arm, holding it out like an offering. The thing lowered its lolling head. It bit down. I heard the wet crunch of bone. I watched in a sick, detached trance as blood, shockingly red, pulsed from the wound and soaked into the greedy soil. The creature lifted its head, its gaunt jaws working, distended with the flesh it had torn away. It chewed for a moment, a rhythmic grinding sound. Then it raised its other hand, the one with the long, spider-like fingers, and plunged it into its own gnashing mouth. It pulled out a mangled piece of my grandfather. Its arm lowered. The rags over its torso fell away, and I saw that where its stomach should have been, there was nothing, just a hollow, concave mess of skin. Then the skin puckered. It split open, and from the raw, wet wound, hundreds of pale, larval fingers unfurled. They squirmed and writhed over each other, dirty, cracked nails scraping, all of them reaching blindly for the meat in the creature's hand. They snatched it, tore it into smaller pieces, and dragged it back into the pulsing, dark orifice they had emerged from. I should have run. I should have been sick. But I just stood there, paralyzed, watching. The sound of it all, the tearing and the chewing and the frantic scrabbling of those awful fingers, it was hypnotic. A terrible, sacred rhythm. When it was done, the thing stood up straight. The fingers receded, the wound in its stomach closing to a thin, dark line. It looked fuller, more solid, almost human. It turned its huge, pale head, and for a second, I thought it looked right at me. Then it folded itself back into the cottage, and the darkness inside swallowed it whole. The mound in the grass stopped moving, I said, smiling down at my son. The man was very, very scared. He just wanted to make his family proud and safe. So he made a promise to a very hungry man who lived in a stone house. Ronan looked up at me, his brown eyes huge in the dim light of his bedroom. Beside him, his younger brother Oisin shifted in his sleep, a faint, wet rattle in his chest with every breath. The hungry man promised that the scared man's family would have everything they ever wanted, I continued, my voice a soft murmur. And for a long time they did. But the man's parents got older, and he knew one day he'd be very lonely. So he went back to the hungry man. And the hungry man promised he would never, ever be lonely again. And soon the man had a wife, and 2 beautiful boys he could play with every single day. I smoothed Ronan's hair back from his forehead. The man wasn't lonely anymore. For the first time, he was happy. But he was so happy, he forgot something important. He forgot to feed the hungry man. I paused, listening to Oisin's labored breathing. It was getting worse. And the hungry man got very, very angry. This made the man very, very worried. I leaned in and booped Ronan's nose. So the worried man made one last promise to the hungry man. "What was it, Daddy?" Ronan whispered, his eyes wide with a child's perfect curiosity. I twisted the gold band on my finger. It felt cold against my skin. "We'll ask Ma'am when she gets home from the hospital,"